We're a company in which we put people and technology at the center. And what we want to talk about is how we, post the pandemic, are thinking about Industry 4.0. So I've got a couple of questions for our team here, but I look forward to hearing questions from the audience. All questions are fair. So let's start off with just a few slides to set the tone. Sudhi, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. Excited to be here. I'm going to use the clicker. There we go. Okay, so thank you. That helps a lot. I wanted to kick off with this one slide along with Peter, just to give you a sense of where we were before the pandemic and some of the things that has happened. So I'm going to cover the left part of the slide, and I'm going to have Peter chime in with the IT perspective on the right side. So my background has been in manufacturing technology. I've been in this business for over 26 years. And at Stanley Black & Decker, I had the opportunity and the absolute privilege to work with some of the finest in my team and with our partners. And so I've been part of the I4O transformation journey for about 3 years now. So I want to start off by the first row here. I think the mindset within our operations, not just Stanley Black & Decker, I used to run a large practice called Smart Manufacturing in Wipro. So I've had the privilege of working with many, many companies across the globe. So when I make these comments, those are general comments, not specific just to our operations. So the first comment there is guarded and rigid. That's sort of how I would describe in general the mindset of folks in manufacturing, not because they want to be guarded and rigid. It's just the nature of the business. It's the background. So that really is what we've all seen. I'm sure all of you in manufacturing would agree to that. Depending on the industry, it becomes more guarded, more rigid. But long story short, it's a very conservative, careful culture. Show me, and then we'll talk. Right, is the approach. And the second comment is the focus around technology and openness. Right. In general, it was really not primary. It's all about, it's great. We see value, but technology is really not the most important thing. It's about how do you actually be safe and make sure that it is proven, etc. So that really has been the mindset. So about three and not even three, I would say 2.5 months, we started seeing a marked stark contrast in terms of both of these 2 points. That people started becoming more open because there was no other recourse. Openness in terms of understanding, learning more about what can we do to shut down operations that truly need to be shut down, and what are the ones that really needs to be open. Kept open so we can continue to make products. So it was essentially a tale of two cities in our business. A lot of activity around tools, tremendous demand. Whereas on the industrial side, we didn't have that kind of demand. So long story short, it was about being more open to doing things that either we enhance capacity or we shut it down. We shut it down gracefully so we can bring the assets back up. So that really was the first thing that we started seeing. And the second component is about being able to now bring in remote technologies and collaboration. Therefore, became critical. So now it was not just about, hey, let's see what we can do, but it really became critical. That's the only way people could start doing some things. Because of all of the travel restrictions, et cetera. And the focus became extremely high. And so now I'm talking about current state. So where we are now is a focus around technology and focus around things that really matter became so important because we were chasing, like most businesses, at least 6 or 7 priorities. We didn't have the top 3 rocks, as we call it now. So the focus now in terms of what exactly we will do and how we will pursue it, the kind of investments we need, the partnerships and talent that we need has become so much more clear. So our level of efficiency has gone up by at least 2 or 3 fold. And then now we also recognize it has to be dual speed. It can't be just one speed, which is about doing, deploying technology or building technology. It's also about anticipating the future. So there's a lot of, let's attack what's possible now while we're actually thinking about, a year, 2 years down the road. So that really is where we are. We started with all the things that I talked about in the first row. Where we are now is we've got tremendous level of focus, alignment with our teams, our investments, and I think we have a much better rhythm in terms of engaging on this dual speed mechanism. With that, Peter, I would love for you to quickly pick up on some of the things you have on the right, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sudhi. So, when you think about what Sudhi was just going through from more of an Industry 4.0 perspective, and one thing, just to set the backdrop a little bit from an SBD perspective, we've been on a transformation journey for the last 3 to 4 years and really focused first and foremost in centralizing, standardizing, and optimizing our IT function. And so that was one of the first steps in how we felt we began to realign more holistically with our business and become that partner, that strategic partner that had a seat at the table, really driving the vision, driving the technology roadmap in a meaningful way for the business. And then in the last year and a half, we've then centralized our operations functions. And so we've gone from a very federated approach where our operations sat within each of our business units, and that president had direct responsibility and accountability for their factories, their DCs, their logistics. And so in the last 18 months, we've then centralized that into a group that is truly a global function. And so as Sudhi stepped into the role as the CTO, it's been really critical that we align on what we kind of laid out here as the 3 main pillars, which is first and foremost, how do we drive the most business value, right? And really looking at that ROI, looking at the investments required to realize the value proposition. And for this purpose of this conversation, really focused in the factories, right? In our DCs, and where is the opportunity and how do we deploy, how do we partner, and how do we align to ensure we can meet those overall expectations. The second pillar is around democratizing our technology and data and looking at ways to really enable our business to take their technology roadmaps and vision forward in a way with partnership from IT to move quickly, to move effectively, and to realize what I was saying before, that value proposition. But lastly, we have to ensure we're thinking about cyber risk mitigation, and we have the correct controls, the right overall vision and accountability and awareness of what's going on in our plants, in our DCs, across our ecosystem to put in the correct overall vision to drive the right balance of control, at the same time giving the flexibility to the business to drive their vision in a very quick manner, and being that partner that engages proactively to move it forward to really allow for the most optimal value realization.
So I would like to, on that particular slide, in the way Peter paraphrased it, I think what it also implies is, as you heard from some of the previous speakers, IT and OT, the way it comes together needs to be as seamless and critical. So that's exactly how we operate. And that's the way we are set up philosophically. That's the way we're set up organizationally. So it has been a phenomenal coming together of both our worlds, at least at Stanley Black & Decker. And I have just another slide that really talks to one of the I would say breakthrough innovation that got fast forwarded during COVID times in less than 3 months. It's called a digital continuous improvement platform. But I would like to pause before I get into the specifics and see if Minh wants to get a conversation going before we dig into this particular topic of what was this one innovation that came out of all the things that both Peter and I talked about. Ben?
Yeah, no, great. And can't wait to hear about the DCIP. But before we go there, Sudhi and Peter, talk to us about in hindsight, it feels easy, it feels impressive, but tell us about the most difficult part of the journey for you. Peter, why don't you start?
Yeah, great, Minh. So, I think Sudhi was briefly talking about the alignment, the partnership, how we work together to really deliver on our overall commitments and the accountability across the teams. And there's a number of different teams, as you would imagine. We're a very large company. When you look at IT, we have 5 or 6 different groups within IT that would participate in any given initiative in a factory. Then you have your operations technology teams under Sudhi, who also will be very heavily involved in deploying these programs. And then, of course, you have your individuals in the factory and your central operations teams that will be defining the requirements and be the ones actually using the technology. And what we found up front is that we probably out of the gates, if I go back 3+ years ago, we weren't as well aligned, and there was a lot of starts and stops where you would start a program with what we thought was very clear intent as far as the deliverable, and you'd find that one team didn't quite understand what the other team was talking about. There wasn't clear handoffs. There was some finger pointing going on. And so early on, Sudhi and I got together and clearly defined the roles, the responsibilities, the interaction model, how we were going to clearly define the outcomes, and then partner to drive that forward in a meaningful fashion. And that didn't happen, organically. It was something we really had to put forth focus, energy, and time to define, to drive the training, to ensure there was the appropriate level of change management occurring across the teams, not only our teams, but also the business teams, so we could deliver on the significant value that was outlined as part of Industry 4.0.
No, great story. Before we go to Sudhi, I'd love to dig in a little bit on that, Peter, because I anticipate a lot of the audience are going through the same pain in their journey. So what happened? Did like you and Sudhi just lean towards each other in meetings, say, "Hey, let's get together and figure this out"? Did someone lock you two in a room? Like, how did you turn that corner?
Well, I think there were, great question, Minh. There were a few, issues up front and maybe in broader meetings that we didn't want to necessarily have those discussions in. And it became very apparent that we weren't fully aligned, that the teams did not completely understand the roles and the responsibilities and the interaction model. So what the process looked like and how we're going to deploy these solutions in our factories, in our DCs, what it meant from an infrastructure standpoint, application perspective, and also the implementation at the point on the line standpoint. And so we just stepped back and we decided we had to put some time, effort into this. It meant we had to slow down a little bit up front and really put the diligence in to document and to involve our teams in the discussion, make sure they fully understood our expectations, and made sure the business understood how we were going to deploy these solutions and how they were going to engage, be trained, and be involved in the implementations in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And listen, knowing you, Peter, I bet your personality just helped that journey a lot. But our audience can't scale personality, and I think it goes down to assume good intentions and talk to each other.
And I would like to also add to what Peter said. I think another thing helped, because I think the fact that this whole transformation program has been directed by the financial organization, especially the CFO. We both report up into Don Allen, who's our CFO and president. So what really helped was the mandate that investments in this whole transformation needs to be fully aligned, and therefore we plug the leaks and so on. So I think that also helped us make sure that the investments we're going after was well aligned and truly congruent with both IT and the OT needs.
Yeah. Oh, great point. And what I heard is sometimes the financial commitment is an enablement, not just a constraint.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Really good. And so, Sudhi, from your personal experience, what was the most difficult part of this journey?
Are you specifically talking through the COVID transition, Minh, or the whole journey of Industry 4.0 over the last 3 years?
The whole journey. Well, we can talk about your marriage as well.
Yeah, that'll take a little longer. So, the whole journey, I think, is the fact that being in corporate and being part of operations and then helping operations, we didn't have global ops at that point. We were still part of corporate. So the fact that we created a global ops organization only about a year and 3 months ago. Until then, it was really hard. Not really hard. It presented a challenge in terms of truly showing the power and the value of working on some of these important aspects of what we're doing in transformation and articulating that to the clients. And that is common in every business I've seen. When you're corporate, you're always viewed with a healthy dose of skepticism. And so it was true within our landscape as well. But then, as I said, once you start showing proof that we can actually bring people that truly can help operations, not stifle them and hit them with more technology, I think it slowly started to change. And then the fact that we then created a overall global ops organizations, that really was very helpful.
Yeah, great. And from both you and Peter's story, I hear a lot about org design, people, collaboration, financial commitment. So great. Sudhi, you teased the slide earlier. Let's go back to that slide before we forget. And then I'd love to get to some more questions, especially from the audience.
Okay. All right. Hey, so here's the one of the core concept of this platform is this is an innovation that I've been chasing personally for about 5-6 years, well before I joined Stanley Black & Decker, but it all came together very nicely during COVID times. Essentially, at the core of the concept is this hunting system that hunts for leakages, right? So right now, you can call it continuous improvement exercises that every company goes through. It takes a lot of effort. It's a very spiky set of events through the year. Eventually, most companies deliver 4 to 6% of productivity, right? So this concept really takes that to a whole different level of efficiency because we built about 16 algorithms. It's an AI-based platform. Essentially, what it does is it hunts for leakages against standards that you've set. It hunts for leakages in material build up, whole host of things across the entire supply chain. So this is what we have at the heart of the system. And then the other key, the two other pieces to it, we built a workflow management system so you don't have manual effort that then takes what's an insight and then see how can we now take that insight and do something with it because it's a lot of busy work and not every client has talent to engage on analytics. Analytics sounds great, but you have the people to really interpret that and do something with it, right? So that's why the ability to use a workflow engine to take insight with these algorithms, translate it into standard work, deliver it to the people that matter, right? Has become a major opportunity for us when we think it's going to be big for the industry as well. And the third component is, as most of you can appreciate, it's really hard to do collaboration in a typical factory type tactical environment, whether it is within the same plant, let alone between plants. So one of the other things that this system does, or this platform does, it allows for rapid real-time collaboration. If we see a leak here, then we'll see which other operations do we have across the company that has could be the same problem. We immediately let them know that. Similarly, if you have overperformance, we want to then do the exact same thing. Let's talk about the good news of how we can share what was an overperformance and rapidly scale it across. So essentially, that's what DSIP has been, and we used it during COVID times, as I said, to identify assets that are truly leaking so we could stop those processes. And then ones that were overperforming are the ones that we really put all our love and attention to, right? So essentially, as you see on the right part of the slide here, the kind of impact that we see in three different ways is it appends decades of traditional thinking, $10 to $100 million, hundreds of millions of dollars of impact for typical Fortune 500 companies, and enable a step change performance of people, because now we're really enabling people to do bigger and better things. This is our core operating model, as Minh talked about. It is technology enabling better performance with people, and people enabling better performance with technology. And it doesn't happen by magic, right? You have to be deliberate. You have to take a lot of effort to make that happen. So that really is what DSIP is, and we have now deployed this in several factories, and we're seeing some very encouraging results coming out of this platform.
Oh, fantastic! That's exciting. Really exciting. We talked about the finance as not just a constraint, but an enablement as we go to Industry 4.0. Sudhi and Peter, I would love you to share your experience in talking to P&L leaders about moving to I4O, because it's a significant capital investment. Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest area of focus when you begin to evaluate launching a comprehensive Industry 4.0 program across your plants and DCs is make sure you're looking at the full scope, right? So it's not just a capital investment of the program. It's the resource investment for individuals in the factory. It's the resource investment for individuals in your IT, OT groups across the different functions of your enterprise. And it's also that investment in leadership and management to ensure that you do get the engagement, the training, the understanding and adoption of these technologies as they are deployed. I mean, I know from my experience as 25 years in technology, the number one reason why a program fails typically is not the technology is flawed. It is that there's not adoption and engagement from the key users, from those stakeholders, the super users in the region, in the market, in the business, and they end up rejecting the technology. So I think those are the areas I would really focus on. And then secondly, and more importantly, in many ways, focus on the value proposition. So what are you going to do? What is the value in your factory, in your DC, through this automation, through this increased visibility, through this increased productivity that will truly drive the savings in your P&L, and plan for it, make people accountable for it, right? So it's not something that you put on a presentation and never go back and revisit it. It needs to be built into your budget, both the cost and the overall savings.
Yeah, really, really good advice, Peter. Thank you. Sudhi, what are your thoughts?
All of the things that Peter mentioned is absolutely critical, but we've also seen that when the chips are down, when it really is time for the operations leader or the local plant leader to say, yes, it's all about, hey, do we really have a good business case, right? And this has been an opportunity, but also a big deterrent, not just for Stanley Black & Decker, but for the entire industry. Because if you really look at where Industry 4.0 sits, especially on the OT side, where you need tons of remediation, we need to make sure that our plants are robust enough with bandwidth and security, et cetera. It costs a lot of money. So long story short, most times, if you really look at business cases in isolation of all the things Peter said, it's hard to get companies to really commit to deployment at scale. However, with Stanley Black & Decker, one of the few things we did early on that helped us a lot was we said that some foundational technologies needs to be a corporate investment. And so we made the determination that that's the way it's going to be. So a lot of the factories then didn't have to really prove a business case to do the basic things that Peter talked about, whether it is people development, whether it is putting the security in place, et cetera. So that really helped a lot. And for all of the folks who are beginning on this journey or is about to scale, I think that would be a consideration that I would urge you to all consider is, can you actually break up the investment into some foundational components and have the corporate corporate take care of that investment, while you truly then pick on the apps and the other enablers on top of the foundational stream that can then go through the rigorous lenses of a business case framework.
Fascinating, Sudhi. So what I think I'm hearing is that, on day one, it doesn't need to be about show me the money and show me how many millions we save. It could be about security and safety and those things. And for our audience, would love, from you or Peter, how do you get the P&L leader to think that way? Or has it always been easy? What are some tactics or approaches you've used with P&L leaders?
I don't know that it's always been easy, Minh. So there's definitely, you go back a number of years, and Sudhi can recall when he first started with SBD, and Global Ops was not in place, so it was still definitely a federated structure. It was challenging to get the buy-in, to get the support from the presidents. Sometimes it was kind of viewed as a corporate initiative. It wasn't really a business-driven initiative. So getting the P&L leaders, getting the presidents within the divisions to fully appreciate and understand the value proposition. And again, looking at all of the elements of value, Minh, like you were saying, it's not just about show me the dollars. It's about show me the improvement in safety and our EH&S scores across our factories, across our DCs. Show me the value when it goes to time of implementation, right? When we look at our end-to-end implementation of a new product line, that with the right technology, with the right alignment from the different groups, whether it's an I 4.0, IT, product development, operations, that we can deliver significant time-constrained value, which ultimately creates value from a dollar perspective, but it's not necessarily driven by it. So I think there's a number of areas. Productivity and safety are top of mind. And typically, what I've seen with our presidents at SBD, they are very interested and gravitate to that quickly.
Yeah, fantastic. Good story. Let me slip one more question in. I know Adam's itching to ask us some questions. So Sudhi and Peter, whoever wants to tackle this one first. Everyone at this conference is aware there's a skill shortage. That's old news. A report just came out earlier this week that there's 8.1 million job postings in the United States alone. The economy is just at the beginning of their boom, their post-pandemic boom. We might be entering a super cycle on attrition. How does this attrition and skill shortage impact the way forward for you two? Do you think about anything differently? Are you worried about anything in particular?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you, please?
Okay. Yeah, I think, I had the fortune of being on the last few minutes of the previous section of this conference, and I heard one of the speakers talk about this, time frame that we're living in is going to create a huge shortage of skills, and the automation, the technology is going to create, obsolete some of our employees, what their current capabilities are, and so. For me, when you think about this, it's so important to look at training and development and how we give our employees the right tools, the right overall training to be more flexible, to be more capable in the new world, that they can adopt and adapt to the way that we are operating with technology at the center, at the forefront. We really need to think about retention differently. And so you look at, I think, career development and training and developing our overall employees as being one of the top that come to mind. And then you really need an on-purpose retention plan. And when you look across your skills, you look across your key employees, what are you doing to proactively engage with them to ensure you're giving them the opportunities, you're challenging them, they're feeling fulfilled at work. I think diversity, inclusion, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, D&I, is another really incredibly important lever that we have to focus on. That's going to really make a difference in our overall attractiveness to our employees from a company standpoint. And SBD is so dedicated, and there's been a major transformation over the years and led by our CEO in that space. And it's something that is built into our culture now, and it's been adopted across the board. And I do think that plays into our ability to retain and really attract strategic and key talent.
Well, really good advice. Sudhi, I hear a rumor that no one leaves your team, so maybe you have no attrition experience to share. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, that is true. We're 98%, is our retention. It's fantastic. So lucky for that. But in addition to the critical things that Peter said, to the question you made, I think we also had to use this opportunity to make our operations so much more attractive for the people who are already there and for attracting the new ones, right? And to that end, you have to be really deliberate in terms of identifying career paths. It's not just about training, it's how do you create a career path for an operator? It's not an easy task, but it's doable. How do you create a career path for a spider, somebody who delivers material to your line, right? And on and on. And we have started the beginnings of creating that kind of a roadmap using technology. There's tremendous headway that has been made with AR, VR in terms of promoting collaboration, not to use it to detect, and do worker instructions, et cetera, that's got its uses. But AR, VR can truly help us collaborate with people across the company and outside with suppliers. So now somebody who may not be trained as a quality inspector, for example, on the line, could suddenly become a quality inspector because there's so much vision and related analytics that can be used to suddenly take a regular operator and become and do some sort of quality inspections. Similarly, somebody like the spider, as I said, can start collaborating with your suppliers. So that way now you're suddenly now making the job more exciting and also creating this upward mobility path for some of the lower end roles within your factory. And similarly, I think when you do things like that, to the point Peter made, D&I and DE&I and social impact, which is a big signature strategy for Stanley Black & Decker. A lot of my folks in my team have joined the company and have become part of this transformation because of our social North Star, which is how can we be a force for the larger good for the community and in manufacturing. So I think for some of the more technology type of profiles that we're attracting, that becomes very important. And so is, of course, for the people on the factory floor. So long story short, it's to complement some of the basic philosophies, et cetera, that Peter called out, deliberate philosophies, and then combine it with some creativity and some deliberate attempts and have a passion around creating these career paths for our people in operations and for the people who build technology.
Really well said. I see Adam's ready. Go for it.
Thank you very much indeed, Sudhi, Peter, Minh, much appreciated. Now, I do have a question. It came in through the chat, and producer Jeremy dictated it to me while I was stood here just now, and I was writing it on my knee. So I hope I've got it correct, but so you talked about new skill sets and all that sort of thing. Has it changed where you look for new hires? Is part one of the question. And part two, has it changed your onboarding process? And then slash COVID-19. So I'm guessing it's saying, has the new skill sets changed your onboarding process, and has COVID-19 changed your onboarding process? So what you want from people, has it changed where you look for new hires? And if so, where are you looking? And then has that changed your onboarding process? And what about the pandemic? I don't know who would like to go first on that one.
I think Minh should go first. He's our chief talent officer.
There we go, Minh.
Yeah, it has changed where we look. So we're going from, let's call it 2019 and before. It was, here's a job, come to us, and here's what we want. Today and going forward, it gets more intense. We're in the war for talent 2.0. We're looking at niches. So it's no longer general job boards to us, it's niche places. Where do these skilled workers hang out digitally and in the human space? And we need to go there. We're also expanding our view of where they can work. And so no longer are we saying there's just one location. We're going with a strategy in which we believe 1/3 of our workforce can work from home, 1/3 are on a flex, and 1/3 tend to be in the office daily. So we're absolutely changing our way. And, even without the pandemic, just the market dynamics with the skill shortage and the economic growth is creating that forcing function.
Absolutely. I mean, really interesting. I think Laurie said it in the panel before. If we want to be attractive to talent, which of course, Minh, is what you've just talked about, 8.1 million job postings, we've got to be attractive to talent. And if that means flexible working, if that means a hybrid work approach, that's what we need to offer. Peter, perhaps I can ask you, sir, how has the pandemic and how has this need for new hires changed the onboarding process?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a much more virtual process now. It's forced us to put more thought into the process. And, in the past, someone would start and we would make sure they're lined up with a number of discussions and interviews and meetings to get them acclimated to their roles, responsibilities, and expectations. Today, given we're 100% virtual, we actually spend a fair amount of time up front thinking through what that plan needs to look like. What are documenting clearly what our 30-day, 60-day, 90-day expectations are for the new hire, outlining all of the individuals they're going to meet with for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, setting up those meetings for them, scheduling the onboarding with the IT department for their PC, their phones, all the other basic logistical items that are still critical to get them started in a way that makes them most effective. And also, it doesn't frustrate them starting with the company. So it really has forced us to be more methodical, to have a really clear outline of expectations, and then to engage them holistically. Since we are virtual, you don't have the hallway conversations. You can't say, let's go out for lunch and talk about an issue or whatever it may be. So scheduling those meetings, and I've just finished one in the last week where I had 35 meetings scheduled for one executive coming in over the course of 3 weeks. But it gave them the perspective and exposure across every group, every function. I'm sure it's a lot to take in the first 3 weeks to month, but it really is impactful for them to understand that there is significant thought going into what they mean to the company, how much we value them. We want them to be successful as they onboard.
Thank you very much, Steve. And Sudhi, I was going to say, you're going to answer, but I was going to echo Minh's point. With 98% attrition, let's not talk about onboarding, but perhaps with your team, lifelong learning. How are you looking to constantly, not necessarily retrain, but upskill and ensure that your team is ready for tomorrow?
Excellent question. Two things. One is, we have a very compelling and a vibrant ecosystem that we've created. So in other words, startups, large companies alike, and then companies in between startups and big companies, they're all part of our ecosystem. And we leverage them not only for their capability and competence, but we also look to them for inspiration. How can my team learn from some of these partners? How can they help them, etc.? So that is extremely important, especially the team that I lead and even what Peter leads. They're very technical in nature. For them to be relevant, for them to be excited, you need a very deliberate mechanism to help do that for inspiration and experience. The second component of that is we have a great opportunity. So now folks on the technology side can actually go to operations and learn about operations. So you can actually have assignments, et cetera, which happens automatically when you go deploy a piece of technology. So you learn a lot about operations. And similarly now, we're now creating a program where folks from operations can come into technology and learn more about technology, right? So those are some of the good things that are now happening because of all of the other things I mentioned. Our transformation program has gotten to a nice inflection point. We are almost at a rhythm of continuous deployment as opposed to just proving things out. And the second thing COVID has taught us is we got to be flexible. So the way we are now engaging with ERG groups and all of those have changed. So that's part of the whole onboarding process. So I think it has made us more acutely aware of how now is the time to do it as opposed to procrastinating with some of these things I talked about.